Okay, this is going to be a slightly big one. A lot of concepts in here, but we've covered this in class, so this is just a reference. What I'm going to do here is take my chord synth that I created a while ago. If it decides to play, oh, right, I got to give the blend a value. Cool, cool, cool. What I'm going to do is take that and I'm going to make it polyphonic. So, how do we go about doing that? First and foremost, let's kind of space everything out here because we're going to need a little bit of that. And what we're going to do is take a look at all of the objects that need to be at the top level of the patch and all of the objects that do not need to be at the top level. So top level objects are things that are going to go into the user interface. So things like gain, spectroscope, scope, and of course easy DAC. Then up top here, things like MIDI in and MIDI parse. So all of that stuff is controlling different aspects. So stuff that we don't necessarily want in terms of user interface to be hidden below at a lower level that people can't control. One thing I am going to get rid of here is I've got these rectangle waves. I'm going to change these all to cycle. Yeah, I know it's boring, but this will make it a lot simpler because it's going to simplify and get rid of one step. Okay, so here's cycle. And let's reinitialize. Okay, or I could use whatever waveform. Again, I don't recommend rectangle or triangle for this unless you really like it because you'll have to have a duty cycle. Let's do saw. Nice. Okay, so this is going to be the interior of my patch. Everything here except for this and those. I'm going to do, just to make sure that I know that. Oh, I missed one. Ah, that guy there. I'm going to change the border color on that to blue, just so I've got that set up. I'm going to move these guys up here and the blend up there. Now, what I'm going to do is select all of these objects that I've got in blue, copy, create a new patch, paste them in. This is functionally identical to what I've got already, except we're going to make a couple of changes. This is going to be the core of my polyphonic synthesizer. So the first thing that I'm going to do is save it, and it has to be in the same directory as what I'm going to put the parent patch in. This is creating the abstraction that Poly will access. So I'm going to call this Poly Core. I'm just going to save it on my desktop because that's where we're doing it, and there it is. Now, in order to communicate with Poly, I have to do a couple of things. First and foremost, I have to create an in, and I have to give it a number. Inlet number is the way that Poly communicates with everything else. Let's just kind of align objects. There we go. And it only takes the number for its argument. Next, I've got all this control data because it's coming in from MIDI. It gets unpacked, and then the pitch gets sent here to the different objects that are going into the M to Fs, and then the velocity goes to divide by 127 and gets sent to ADSR. Cool. Next, I need to have an outlet. And that's going to have a tilde because it is coming out of Poly, and at this point you can see everything is audio anyway, so yeah, we're going to do that. You'll notice I have a couple of things that are not here anymore. I've got these knobs. So what I need to do here is to create some objects that will communicate from this top level patch into this lower level one. If only there were a way I could communicate to any number of named objects from a different location. I wonder if... Oh, there is. There's send and receive. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to create a new object. This is going to be R because it's control data. And I'm going to call it noise blend. I'm using camel case here to indicate that. And that's going to go exactly where the blend was hooked up. So one goes to the exclamation subtract 1 point, and one goes to this multiply. Just like that. And then I need one each for ADSR. Okay. R, envelope A. Then we're just going to duplicate D. Followed by S and R. And that goes to attack, to decay, to sustain, and to release. And at this point, to make sure that I know that those are going somewhere else, I'm going to change the border color. Let's make it something really annoying. How about that carnation pink? Looks like an old CGA monitor where I've got pink and black and blue and white, and those were the only 4 colors you could have. Ouch. Okay. I'm going to do one more thing. Because this is going into Poly, Poly can kind of make your CPU explode if you're not careful with the voice count. So effectively what I'm going to do is I need to create a way to tell Poly to get rid of a voice, because we have to give it a set number of voices and then it allocates those dynamically. And yeah, you don't want it to have voices staying on and then you start noticing, hey, my CPU is at 100% all the time. This is bad. So there's got to be a way to do that, and in fact there is with this Poly. So this Poly, let's take a look at the help file. Controls Poly voice allocation and muting. Okay. So that doesn't tell me a lot, but I'll give you a really, really good set of tricks. If you give it a signal, and the signal is non-zero, so anything above functionally off, it will turn the voice on. If the signal drops down to 0, it turns the voice off. The other way you can do it is ADSR has a mute message. It's the third outlet. If I connect that up to Poly, that will mute it. So at this point, I am effectively done. All I need to do is I'm going to copy those guys for the send. So we're going to save this here, Polycore, it's on the desktop. And now I'm going to go over here to this guy, and let's delete everything in its path. I'm going to paste that, and then we're going to change all of these to S for send. And don't forget the space in between the send and the variable name. Otherwise, you'll get problems. And you gotta love those error codes. Die. Oh, and there's another one. All right, fine. So, blend is going to go to blend, if I can actually draw a patch cord. Attack to attack, decay to decay, sustain to sustain, release to release. If you'll remember, I said that if I were going to use a rectangle wave or a triangular wave oscillator, I would need a duty cycle. That would be an extra one of these. So I would do something like, live.dial, and then that would go to S, not S, S duty cycle, just like that. But I went with saws, so I don't need that. Okay, so this will send stuff into poly or into any abstraction, which is what this is. Saving the code into a reusable patch that I can use anywhere else in Max is called an abstraction. And it's really, really, really useful. Now we have to prep this to actually work with poly. And at this point, we're about 99% there. The only thing you might want to do is to consider adding a filter. Do we want to filter at the top level, or do we want to filter at somewhere inside the abstraction? I like my filter graph where I can see it. So I'm going to create the filter graph. I'm going to create a biquad. I'm going to create a edit mode for the user interface, and then I'm going to hook that up. But we still haven't created poly. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to create a couple of other things. I'm going to save this as Chord Synth Poly. This will be on the desktop. It has to be in the same folder that you have your abstraction, otherwise it won't talk to each other. So I've got Chord Synth Poly. That guy can go hide somewhere else. And then I've got Poly Core. And because they're both saved into the same folder, in this case my desktop, I can now bring it up with poly. So poly takes a couple arguments. The first one is the name of the patcher that you're going to go for. So I'm going to go with Poly Core. And this will only work because they are in the same folder. They're both in the desktop. Then it takes a number of voices. Well, I only have 10 fingers, so that sounds applicable. And at this point, I should be able to connect it. But before I get into poly from MIDI parse, I need to run one more object, which is MIDI format. Really easy. I connect it up to here, and then I'm going to take the MIDI event output and connect that directly into poly. The reason I'm doing that, I could do it another way, but this way allows me to do stuff with MIDI parse up in the top level, which you may find very, very useful later on. So next thing, I'm going to give some initialization values because these are live.objects. So init enable 0. Init enable 10 point to 20 point. Point 0.75. And last but not least, we'll make this 250. Again, this is why I absolutely love the live.dials. You can set them to have initial values, save, hit delete, goes to 0, goes to 10, goes to 220, goes to 75, goes to 250. Okay, let's test it. I'm going to load up, make sure I've got the correct device. Audio is turned on. I think it's working. Let's set a low pass. I got nothing. Let's sweep the low pass. And again, that is why I wanted to have MIDI parse up here. I'm going to do our good old Route 74 for my y-axis. Take that, and then let's scale. 0, 127. I'm just going to go directly into frequency. Let's try 1. Let's do it in the opposite direction. Let's do 22,000 to 1,000, which will give me a negative sweep. I should probably actually put decimals at this point. That might actually be a good thing. I'm going to connect that up to the cutoff. Oh, that's cool. So that's it. I have a working polyphonic patch. If I double click poly, it opens up and it shows me the patch. It shows me the current instance that's being edited. If I hit another one, it should shift to a different number. Well, no, it didn't, but yeah, you can edit it. You can play around. Let's test all these values. Okay, let's go to the attack. Decay. That is so cool. This is kind of the object that everybody thinks is really hard, but it really, really is easy. You just need to make sure you've got the in and the out and that you're using this poly with ADSR to make sure that you're not having all sorts of voices and just creating explosions, because if you do, then poly will eat up your CPU. But really, that's it. Just communicate into poly using S and then R inside the actual poly abstraction and have fun.